is very clear. Again, even for people who don't want, people who want most of all to reduce drug use in America ought to be the major critics of the policy we now have in place. Now, what do you do about it? Well, first of all, you make these kinds of arguments. As I said, people are free, obviously, to advocate for themselves if this is a good thing, but I don't think that ought to be part of any legislative posture, not because we're being hypocritical, but because that's not the argument. The argument is not, by the way, it would be as wrong for the government to, it seems to be in the business of saying, hey, we got a great idea. Why don't you go smoke some dope? I don't want the government doing that. What you want is the right of adults to make their own choices. What you want is to save the money that is wasted. What you want is to stop, and I think this is a very important point. I urge you to think about this if you haven't focused on it before. Correlate the extent to which we have complaints about police privacy invasion with the need to enforce the drug laws. Privacy has become a new major issue in America. George Bush, you may know, backed down. He was going to overturn a lot, and has been overturning a lot of the last-minute Clinton executive orders. One which he agreed to keep in place, although with some modification, will be medical privacy. Americans, middle-class Americans, mainstream Americans have become very concerned about privacy invasions. And I think it's you know, the facts are on our side to connect the drug war with many of the privacy invasions that people are doing. People don't like being stopped in their cars and all these things, and that's a big part of it. So I would make those arguments. But the most important point I want to make is procedural. One of the great mistakes many of my friends on the left make is to exaggerate the role of money in politics. Yeah, money is important, but it's not as important as votes. I guarantee you this. You go to any member of the United States House of Representatives and say, look, staff member says, you got 40 minutes to catch that plane, and you got to be on the plane, you got to get back to the district. And there are two groups that want to meet with you, and they're in separated parts of the Capitol, so you can only make one. You can meet one group for 10 minutes, and then you got to get in the car and get to the plane. In one room are 10 of your contributors, none of whom live in our district. And in another room are 10 constituents. And all I know about them is that they're constituents. I don't know any member who won't go to see the constituents. You know, contributors are fungible. I mean, part of what people don't understand, I'm on the committee that used to be called the banking committee, now financial services. I get on it because I was interested in housing. And then I found that they had these other issues, obviously, the banks versus the insurance companies versus the securities firms, the mortgage brokers versus the banks versus the realtors. And I began to think, you know, I do what I thought made the most sense, what was the most pro-competitive, what was the most pro-consumer. Now, in some cases, you're just choosing among contending industry groups. And you know what? However you vote, you get money. If you vote against the banks, you get money for securities. If you vote against securities, you get money for securities. I mean, raising money is not as hard as people think, and it's not as controlling. But it certainly, it may fill a vacuum, but it will not be public opinion. I guarantee you this. I've been a legislator now for 28 years, and that's what we talk about. And I have never, and you know, we don't lie to each other that much. When I've approached members as part of a lobbying team within the legislative branch, I need your vote on this. People will say to me, whether I'm doing it on behalf of the Democratic leadership or on behalf of some other issue I'm involved in, often people say, gee, pal, I think you're right, but I'll get killed back home if I vote for that. I can't take that position. I've never had anybody say to me, oh, geez, I got a big contributor, I can't do that. That's not considered legitimate among us, and maybe that might be influencing some people, but they don't even admit it to us, each other, and I think it rarely does. Public opinion is overwhelming, and the other point I want to make, though, is this. I think people on the left, in general, are wrong when they argue that the people are more enlightened than the politicians. I always tell you, after 28 years in this business, I often find my colleagues in politics to have made mistakes, and I certainly think people in the media make mistakes. But I'll be honest with you, the voters are no bargain either. There's a lot of this bringing out the worst in each other. But one issue in which it is clear that the average voter is more enlightened and less hung up on cultural lags and shibboleths is drug policy. The voters are more sensible. They know what works and what doesn't work. They have family members. They have seen, they know what it will take to help people who are substance abusers, etc. So this is one where I do believe that we can mobilize public opinion and win some victory. And obviously we won in a lot of these referenda. Now, the key is simply lobbying members. It's not demonstrations. You know, people say to me, well, we're going to be real militant show or we're going to have a demonstration. Person for person, there is no more successfully militant political organization in America than the National Rifle Association. You ever heard about them having a shooting? Or how about the AARP? It used to be the American Association of Typewriters. It's very, very influential. Have you seen a kind of mass shuffle down Pennsylvania? The most politically effective groups in America do not have demonstrations. If a demonstration is helpful to you in motivating your own members to then do the political action, that's a good thing. But nobody in Congress cares how many people are out on the wall. I only care how many people, if I'm calculating politically, I care about how many call my office. There are a million people out there. How the hell do I know where they're from, or when they're registered? Or where do they know who the member of Congress is? So it's very simple. We need to get all of our people, this is what the NRA does. You get all of your people to know who everyone is who represents them in elected office. The city council, the state legislature, the county level, and the federal level. State legislature and federal level, most important when you're dealing with these things. Secondly, make sure they're registered to vote. Third, make sure they know a person's position. I will tell you, I will get letters from people urging me to please consider voting for the bill I just introduced. And I got to say, well, it's nice to know that we agree, but my impression that they are aware of what the hell I'm doing is very great, and you're not afraid of people if they know what you're doing. So you need just to do that, and then let people know you're thinking about it. We have a great unmobilized potential in terms of public opinion. The referenda are good, but if everybody who voted in the referenda had written also to his or her member of the House and Senate, it would have an impact. That, you know, it's very simple, and I'll just start repeating myself. I'm just going to say, well, having people know who the legislators are, be registered to vote, have a record of voting in primaries. By the way, one of the things that people don't do enough of is to vote in primaries. In many parts of this country, the primary is the more important place to vote. I think people will be pleasantly surprised at the response they will begin to get. And it's also the only effective way we have. I guarantee politicians aren't concerned about other things. They worry about whether or not they're going to get reelected to the extent that they're not talking about the merits. And that's the way to do it. I would particularly begin to focus on those politicians in the states where medical marijuana referenda have passed. And you ought to try to rally the people who voted for those referenda. Tell them to write to their member of Congress and say, hey, this member of Congress you're voting for, he or she isn't carrying out your wishes expressed in a referendum. But I think people will be pleasantly surprised. And I understand the skepticism and the cynicism of many, either on the left or on the right, people who've been sort of alienated in the political process. And they think, oh, you're telling me the system works. Well, it does in this sense. Believing that a politician is going to pay attention to the voters in his or her district does not impute to him or her any great virtue. I mean, you know, on the other hand, the notion that politicians are going to pay a lot of attention to people who don't vote doesn't make any sense. It's just, you know, even if you have a fairly unpleasant view of the political process, I have a much better one myself, but we're saying take it at its most cynical. Tell these people that they don't do the right thing, you're not going to vote for them, and you'll have an impact. I mean, reduce it to that. But there is too little of that among various activist groups. So I am glad to see people who are committed to doing this and meeting here in Washington. And I guarantee you that we won't win right away, but with the degree of public support that is obviously out there, is manifested in the referenda, we have a potential to make American drug policy, at first, significantly less stupid. And then, I'm going to set that as an interim goal, and then we can move on to better.